What's it like to have unreliable parents? My dad's a small-time crook, and my mom's a little rebel. They had me before they got married and didn't care much about me. However, one day my dad grabbed me and questioned, "You're in the 6th grade and still haven't skipped a single class? Is there something wrong with you?" My mom also yelled, "Look what I found in his room, a model student award. How could he have such a disgraceful thing? What are we going to do?" Enraged, they dragged me out of the house, determined to set me on the right path by taking me to dye my hair, get a tattoo, and hang out in internet cafes. Sebastian saw me with my backpack and asked, "Where are you going so early?" I replied, "School." He said, "It's Saturday." I retorted, "The semester exams are approaching and our study group organized a review session." Sebastian, who had slept off his hangover on the sofa, rubbed his eyes and said, Wait a minute." He propped himself up and looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Then he shouted for my mom, "Victoria, Victoria, come here." Victoria, back from an all-nighter with heavy makeup still on her face, shuffled into the living room, cursing, "What are you yelling for? Are you trying to kill me?" Sebastian pointed at me and said, "Your son isn't into truancy." Victoria, pulling at her false eyelashes, irritably replied, "Take care of yourself." Then, turning to me, she said, "What are you waiting for? Go do your thing." After the morning review session, I returned home to find them both there. It was rare for all three of us to be home at the same time. When I got home from school was when they were usually out having fun, and when I was in school was their sleep time. It was unusual for all three of us to be awake at home, making me feel a bit uneasy, especially since I could feel their eyes on me, following me around. I walked back to my room stiffly, closing the door behind me and sighing with relief. I turned around to see my things in disarray. Obviously someone had gone through them. Outside, Victoria, in a rare serious tone, said, "I called the school. He was really studying this morning. It's unbelievable." Sebastian, speechless, said, "I'm not surprised he was at school, but I thought he was there for something else." He sounded dejected, paused, and added, "But I turned his room upside down and didn't find any love letters. When I was his age, I was writing love letters every day." Victoria asked, "To whom? Who else did you write love letters to?" Sebastian replied, "Are you sick? Is that the point?" Victoria said, "So what's the point?" "Oh, right, there were no love letters." Sebastian sighed. "Not only no love letters, but look at this." Victoria, flipping through papers, said in a trembling voice, "Is this? Oh my God, at his age he has this." Sebastian sighed again. "Yes, a model student certificate, not a labor model or a progress flag bearer, but a model student in all aspects. How did he get this dirty thing? What are we going to do?" I was speechless. Victoria sniffed and said, "It's partly our fault he turned out this way." Sebastian, also dejected, said, "Our kid, we expected some rebellion, but not this kind." I wasn't really listening to them, just wandering around the room appreciating the chaos left by their thorough search. At the beginning of this semester, my deskmate Emma complained that her parents had removed the lock from her room door so they could check on her any time. She said she had no privacy and was furious, sulking for a long time. While comforting her, I was secretly envious. Her parents cared so much about her. I knew she would scold me if I said it, and if I were in her shoes, I might be upset too. But my envy was real. My room had always been completely my own. They had never even stepped in, no matter what noise I made or if the light was on late at night. I tried leaving the door open on purpose, but within 2 minutes Sebastian would come and close it, muttering about being annoyed by the sound of pages turning. Now I finally got to experience some parental concern. I walked out slightly embarrassed and asked, "Did you go through my stuff?" They exchanged glances. Sebastian scratched his head, cleared his throat, and pointed at Victoria. With a crisp slap, Victoria smacked his hand away and said, "It was his idea." I was speechless and said, "Okay, just don't mess up my papers next time. I haven't sorted them into my binder yet." Victoria waved her hand quickly. "There won't be a next time." I was suddenly anxious and said, Don't say that. Fine, don't worry about my papers. Just go through my stuff if you want. She froze, touched her forehead, then mine. Seeing me biting my lip to hold back laughter, Sebastian was startled and asked, "What are you laughing at?" I replied softly, "This is what motherly love feels like." Victoria jerked her hand away as if burned and said angrily, "What nonsense are you talking about?" She took a deep breath, turned back to me and said, "Go change your clothes. We're going out." I asked, "To buy groceries? We have enough for me for 2 days." Thinking for a moment, I added, "Are you going to eat at home too? Then we need to buy more. What should I make?" They rarely ate at home, and even if they did, they would just scavenge my leftovers from the fridge. Since I made very simple and balanced meals, not focusing on flavor, they wouldn't eat my food unless they were really hungry. Sebastian reflexively refused when I said I was going to cook. "Your taste is too picky. I'd rather eat instant noodles." I interrupted him. "Instant noodles are not nutritious." Victoria said, "All right, stop arguing. We're not eating. You and you, get ready in 3 minutes. Today's mission is tough. If anyone doesn't cooperate, don't blame me for losing my temper outside." So, on a sunny afternoon, the 3 of us went out shopping together. I walked briskly, deciding that when I write about my most unforgettable day, I must include this dreamlike scene. Victoria took us straight to a hair salon. She was a regular there. The owner greeted her from afar. "Victoria, didn't you just dye your hair a few days ago?" "Already bored," she replied. "Not me." Victoria pushed me forward and said, "Dye his hair." The owner looked at me curiously and asked, "How old is this kid? Don't mess around. If his parents find out, they'll cause trouble." Victoria frowned. "None of your business. Pick a color for him." The owner didn't say much, bent down and asked me, "Little brother, what color do you want?" I shook my head, almost saying Mom, but stopped in time. Victoria didn't like me calling her Mom. When I first learned to speak, I called her Mom like in cartoons. She pulled a face and said, "Shut up. Who taught you that? Don't call me that again." Sebastian didn't mind me calling him Dad, but he often didn't respond. When I was little, I carried 5 pounds of rice home and saw him in front. I called him Dad for a long time, but he didn't seem to hear. Only when I called his name did he turn around quickly, took the rice, and complained, "I gave you pocket money, and you bought useless stuff. This could buy so many packs of instant noodles." So, Dad and Mom, like Grandma and Grandpa, were rarely used words in my world. I scanned the color board and looked back for Victoria's opinion. She pointed to yellow and muttered, "This one. Will it look like a yellow-haired punk?" The owner was shocked. "Isn't that too rebellious?" "It's supposed to be rebellious," Victoria said firmly. Then she looked at me and said, "Listen to me. You look too plain." I nodded, "Okay." She was stunned and gave Sebastian a look, as if to say, "This kid can be taught." I said, "But I think it's not rebellious enough." Victoria looked at the color board and asked, "Then how about adding some green? It's a bold color." I was speechless. I sat in front of the mirror and said solemnly, "Fancy colors are for silly kids. I don't like them. I think my mind is very mature. I appreciate deep, dark, misunderstood colors." Sebastian clicked his tongue and said, "Oh, I know this talk too well. I used to think the same way." He leaned closer to Victoria and said, "See, he inherited some good traits." Victoria handed me the color board and said, "So which one do you want?" I said, "I told you, a deep, dark color that represents my despair and rebellion." Half an hour later, I walked out of the salon with neatly trimmed black hair. Sebastian and Victoria stared at my back in confusion, paying the owner and asking, "Is this rebellious?" The owner scratched his head and said, "He has a point. He's the only one who comes here for a buzz cut." For the second stop, Victoria took us to a small, inconspicuous shop with tattoo designs covering the walls. I was dazzled. Victoria pushed me into a chair and said to the man behind the counter, "Frank, I brought you a new customer." Frank looked at me and asked, "What kind of tattoo do you want?" Victoria rolled up her sleeve, showing the tattoo on her wrist, a circle of numbers. She said, "This was my first tattoo, my parents' death anniversary. Not much reference value." She continued rolling up her sleeve, revealing a tattoo on her upper arm. I knew it said innovation. I had asked her before why it said innovation. She vaguely said it was a good word. Now she admitted, the tattoo artist asked what I wanted. I wanted something unique, so I said innovation, and he tattooed this. I gave a puzzled smile. Sebastian glared at me, and I quickly restrained my expression. I said, these two aren't much reference either. Victoria snorted. What a hassle. She patted Sebastian and asked, what was your first tattoo? Sebastian thought for a moment and showed the dragon on his arm. Nonsense, Victoria said. We were together when you got that. Sebastian said, I forgot. Frank shook his head and said, I remember it was on his lower back. He was a kid, said he wanted utter despair. He ran away after the first word, didn't even pay me. Sebastian blushed. I paid the second time. I interrupted. I've decided. I stretched out my arm and said, tattoo a phrase. Sebastian gave a thumbs up. Bold. Frank prepared his tools and asked, what phrase? I said, study hard and make progress every day. Victoria and Sebastian were speechless. Frank paused, looked at me, put down his tools and said to them, why bring a good student here, or don't lead him astray? Victoria nudged me and said, change it, make it heartfelt. I thought for a moment and said seriously, heartfelt, then I love my dad and mom. Before I finished, Victoria fled. Sebastian, with goosebumps, pulled me out. Walking on the street, Victoria didn't look at me and said, forget it. You might inherit that loser gene and run after one word. I can't afford to lose face. Sebastian gritted his teeth. Who's a loser? I didn't make a sound when I got my dragon tattoo. Victoria rolled her eyes. You're great. Now where to? Or I have no idea. Sebastian pointed not far away and said, that's easy, the internet cafe, my happy place. Great, I shouted, jumping up and down. They watched me with satisfaction, saying he gets it. I eagerly touched the keyboard and moved the mouse. Usually I could only use a computer during school information classes, which were once a week and often taken over by the homeroom teacher. But just now I clearly heard they got me 3 hours and set up computers for themselves on my left and right. This meant the computer in front of me was mine alone, and I was overwhelmed with happiness. They discussed which game to start me on, but couldn't agree. Victoria said, your game is too childish. Look, only kids play it, and you're the only idiot mixing in with them. Sebastian retorted, you don't understand. It's nostalgic. The game you play is shallow. They argued for a long time and decided to let me choose. So, they each opened their games and told me to watch. They played with all their might, the sounds of keyboards and mice clicking around me. Sebastian slapped the keyboard and stood up, full of pride, saying, that was awesome. Victoria scoffed. Winning a game isn't hard. What's important is which one he likes. Sebastian asked, right, Michael, what do you think? They turned to look at me, confused, forgetting what to ask. Victoria saw my engrossed expression and asked, Michael, what are you doing? I stopped typing and excitedly pointed to the left side of the screen. Word. I was typing out the text we memorized. This keyboard is better than the one at school, so I type faster. Sebastian and Victoria were speechless. I pointed to the right side, and with this PowerPoint I can create beautiful stuff. Look at this animation effect, it's so interesting. They silently watched me demonstrate for a while, then whispered to each other, where's the fun in that? Do you see it? It's a single-player game. For the next 2 hours we each played our own games, but they seemed less engaged, occasionally glancing at me. My choice turned out to be the most interesting. Leaving the internet cafe, I was satisfied and told Victoria, let's go home. She glanced at me, not in a hurry. I asked why. She said, there's an important thing left to do. Confused, I watched her whisper to Sebastian, then we headed towards home. However, they stopped at the entrance of the next neighborhood. Sebastian pointed to an old pastry shop and said, see those date cakes on the shelf at the door? They're perfect for you now. I nodded. Thanks. He said, why thank me? Go get some. I thought he was buying them for me, but it turned out I had to buy them myself. I pulled out my pocket money, but he grabbed it, his tone turning stern. Go steal some." I was stunned. "Steal? That's stealing." Victoria chimed in. "It's important to learn a skill early." Shocked, I said, "You call this a skill?" "No, I won't be a thief." She tried to persuade me. "You don't have to steal, but you can't lack the ability to steal." I was speechless. What nonsense. Tears welled up in my eyes. Sebastian looked into the distance and said, "When we were your age, we didn't want to steal and almost starved. One day, she was in pain, starving, pale-faced. I stole from this shop. The date cakes are always in that spot. The owner is lame, so I managed to steal the first time. Later, I stole elsewhere, got caught, beaten. Desperate with hunger, I came back here." Victoria stared at me and said, "So it's a survival skill. If you ever have to, you won't starve. Starving is terrible." Caught off guard by their story, I hesitated but followed them. We reached the shop entrance and they pushed me forward. I peeked inside. The old man at the counter was napping. It was a good chance. I lifted my hand but felt it weighed a ton and pulled back, saying I can't. Sebastian quickly covered my mouth, glanced at the owner and said, "Watch, I'll show you." He walked to the shelf, pretending to look at the price list on the other wall. He skillfully grabbed 2 date cakes, turned, blocking them with his body, then casually walked away and handed the cakes to Victoria. I watched from the door. They leaned against the wall, enjoying the cakes, and motioned for me to steal another. Taking a deep breath, I called out, "Sir!" They stopped chewing, eyes wide with panic. "Sir, how can you run a business like this? Your shop's getting robbed." The old man asked, "What? Who's stealing from me?" Rubbing his eyes, he got up, limped closer, stopped to rub his legs and squinted. "There's no one else here but you." "They are," I pointed, realizing they had disappeared. Sebastian and Victoria waited around the corner for a long time, finished their cakes, and sensed something was wrong. They returned to find me trapped by the old man behind the counter. Sebastian rushed in angrily. "Old man, what are you doing to the kid?" I wiped my face and tearfully said, "Pay him and get me out. I want to go home. This is unlucky." Sebastian threw some change, pulled me out from behind the counter and said, "Can't you run?" I replied, "Not enough. Give me 50 more." I ordered a cake. As Victoria hurried over from across the street, Sebastian was scanning to pay. She understood from his muttering and looked down at me with date cake crumbs still on my lips. Victoria asked, "Are you saying this old man took Michael as a thief, gave him something to eat, and Michael even ordered a cake from him?" Sebastian nodded. "Exactly." Victoria pointed at the old man, questioning, "Did you force the kid to buy a cake? You sure have a lot of tricks for an old man, giving him food to make him spend money. Do you think we're fools? We're not buying your damn cake." Before she could finish, $50 was paid through Alipay. Victoria punched Sebastian in the arm, scolding, "Why are you so quick with your hands?" I wiped my mouth and said, "I wanted to buy it." Victoria coldly replied, "Impossible, you never eat such unhealthy stuff. Did the old man trick you?" I replied softly, "My birthday is coming up." My voice was small, but it seemed to have a huge impact on Victoria, who suddenly went quiet. Sebastian was still arguing with the old man, saying, "Give me the money back." I was too quick. Victoria punched him again, saying, "All right, we bought it." She then turned and walked out of the shop, with Sebastian following reluctantly, taking out his frustration on me. "Why did you call the old man? We could have been home by now." I replied, "I was just curious why he was pretending to sleep." Sebastian paused mid-step and asked, "Pretending to sleep?" I said, "I saw him open his eyes when you took the date cakes." Sebastian raised an eyebrow and said, "What's so strange about that? He's afraid of getting beaten, so he endures. Do you think I'm just messing around? Look at my build and fierce face. Stealing gives him face. If I just took them, what could he do to me?" I looked at Sebastian's scruffy appearance and tried to suppress a smile. "But he said you were skinny like a monkey when you were little." Sebastian gritted his teeth. "What nonsense, I didn't know him when I was a kid." I replied, "He also said you both liked date cakes, so no matter how the shop was rearranged, the date cakes were always near the door." Sebastian stopped, glanced back and said, "That's nonsense. The old man is senile." Before I could say more, He quickly caught up with Victoria, distancing himself from me. The sky darkened, and despite some hiccups, the day gave me an unprecedented feeling of happiness. As soon as we got home, I headed straight to the kitchen but was stopped by Sebastian. "Don't make anything unappetizing. We're having this today." He opened a foam box in the corner, revealing neatly stacked crabs. I asked, swallowing, "Where did these come from?" Squatting down to look, he said, "From Jack." Jack was the wealthy second generation that Sebastian followed around. He could get food and drinks just by being at his beck and call, sometimes even getting small sums of money, which was essentially his entire job. The crabs were steamed and brought to the table, but Victoria seemed distracted. When she was silent, Sebastian didn't dare speak either. I mimicked their silence, quietly dismantling the crabs and sucking on the legs. The table was silent. As we were about to finish the meal, Victoria casually asked, "When's your birthday again?" I replied, "Next Friday." Putting down the crab leg, I asked expectantly, "Are you going to celebrate my birthday?" She cleared her throat. "You know we don't celebrate birthdays in this family." I knew that. I know. Since I might not be with my friends after starting middle school, I wanted to celebrate with everyone. The cake money can be deducted from my pocket money. Victoria didn't respond but asked, "Do you have a, birthday wish?" I bluntly replied, "Yes, can you go to the parent-teacher conference this time?" "You've never been," and this time the teacher specifically asked for my parents. Before Victoria could answer, Sebastian said, "What's the big deal? She has plenty of time during the day." Victoria glared at him. "Is it about time?" Sebastian retorted, "Why ask for his birthday wish if you're not going to fulfill it? Look at me, if I know I can't do it, I don't even mention it." Victoria shot back, "Aren't you a parent too? Doesn't this concern you?" I was speechless and silently cleaned up the trash and went back to my room. The argument continued for a long time. Sebastian's voice rose. "I'd rather move bricks on a construction site all day than go to a parent-teacher conference, be humiliated, laughed at. My father beat me up so bad I couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. I had that experience once, and even 20 years later I still have nightmares about it." Victoria thought for a moment and said, "I'd rather do a 48-hour live stream, but he already asked. The teacher specifically named me to go. Maybe he got caught faking awards. I don't understand why he did that. There are better things to want than those dirty things. The students who got awards in my class, they threw their awards in my face. Seeing an award makes me want to cry. And he got a fake one? Does he want to be a bad person that badly?" Sebastian said, "Then don't go." Victoria replied, "Then you go." Sebastian was speechless. "What's wrong with you? I'm helping you, and you push me into the fire." Victoria sniffled. "Since I started it, I'll go. I've been through worse. When dozens of people bullied me, I endured it. I'm not afraid of this." She listened to 2 voice messages, then told Sebastian, "Grace called me. It's the weekend. I'll do an extra 2-hour stream." Sebastian laughed. "The sun must be rising from the west. You're reporting your schedule to me now?" Victoria sneered. "Die." With a scream from Sebastian, Victoria left. Soon after, Sebastian left while talking on the phone with a friend. The house suddenly became very quiet, like a soap bubble bursting, a damp silence. On the day of the parent-teacher conference, as a class leader, I went to school to help, as always. As I guided parents towards their respective classrooms at the school gate, I noticed Victoria pacing back and forth, taking 2 steps forward and then retreating. I couldn't leave my post but waved at her, which she didn't see. Soon after, Sebastian arrived at full speed. Victoria looked surprised as he jumped off his motorcycle, exchanged a few words with her, and finally walked over together. I asked Sebastian, "Why are you here?" He looked straight ahead, barely acknowledging me, adjusted his mohawk, and took a deep breath before walking through the gate. Victoria whispered to me, "He said we're in this together." By the time I returned outside the classroom, they were already sitting at my window seat. I smiled at them through the window, and they returned awkward, strained smiles that looked more like grimaces. The homeroom teacher began reviewing the semester's performance. I knew they weren't listening to a word. Usually, both of them were slouched or fidgeting. Now they sat with hunched shoulders, heads down, and hands clasped tightly, awaiting judgment. The teacher said, "This is a critical period as we transition from elementary to middle school, so I must take this opportunity to address some students' issues." Sebastian and Victoria shrank further into their seats. I saw the spikes of Sebastian's mohawk trembling. There are students who struggle with certain subjects, are careless with their work, or have regressed due to distractions from novels or games. We'll be handing out report cards with notes for parents to review. They sighed with relief, whispering to each other, "No specific criticism, thank goodness." Victoria asked, "Which category does our son fall into?" Sebastian replied, "Keep it down, it's embarrassing. He's probably at the bottom, let's not scold him later." The teacher continued, "Another important matter is the student's mental health. Although we haven't faced this issue in our school, there have been reports of bullying in others. Parents, please work with us to build trust so children feel safe coming to us with their problems. Some endure bullying for years, bearing immense pressure. Others, feeling cornered, may become accomplices in wrongdoing. Early trust and warmth can be a lifelong support, but without it, the gap may never be filled." Parents nodded and clapped. Only Sebastian and Victoria looked stunned. Sebastian's childhood stories often involve beatings and hearing, "You're worthless. Why don't you just die?" Victoria lost her parents young and lived with her uncle, who mistreated her until he wanted to sell the house left by her parents, our current home. She refused, leading to her living alone, selling belongings, and scavenging to survive. Isolated at school, she found solace with an older girl, a dropout, who sometimes gave her food. I called softly, "Dad, Mom." They didn't react until a parent behind them tapped their shoulders, saying, "The teacher called you up." Startled, they hurried to the stage, looking like students being scolded. They stole glances at the teacher, who repeated, "I invite Michael's parents to share their educational experience." They looked shocked. Sebastian muttered, "What experience?" Scratching his head, unable to move his heavily styled hair, Victoria took the lead. "I'll speak." But she had only planned that line and was at a loss for words. Facing the expectant audience, she looked at me and said, "Honestly, we don't have any educational experience. Michael's success is 1,100% his own doing. No, 1,105%, because sometimes we may not help but rather hinder him. Standing here is embarrassing. Let him come up instead." As she tried to leave with Sebastian, the teacher smiled and stopped them. "Such modest parents. Although this is our first meeting, I know a bit about you from Michael's essays. You've provided a free and safe environment for him to thrive." I watched their faces turn redder. "So this award for Michael, let his parents present it to him." I entered the classroom and stood by. They took the certificate from the teacher, admiring it, whispering, "A real award. I dreamed of this as a kid but never got one. So this is what it feels like." Reluctantly, I had to interrupt. "That's mine." They handed it to me, eyes still glued to it. Unlike their tense approach, they left the school with heads held high, floating. On the way home, they bombarded me with questions. "How are your grades so good? We thought you were faking it." "Yeah, we didn't want to burst your bubble." "Whose brain did you inherit? Must be mine." Nonsense. It's definitely from me. By the school gate, directing parents towards their classes, I saw Victoria hesitating, pacing forward and backward. Unable to leave my post, I waved at her, but she didn't notice. Shortly after, Sebastian arrived on his motorcycle. Victoria looked surprised as he jumped off, exchanged a few words, and finally walked over together. I asked Sebastian, "Why are you here?" He looked straight ahead, barely acknowledging me, adjusted his mohawk, and took a deep breath before walking through the gate. Victoria whispered, "He said we're in this together." By the time I returned outside the classroom, they were already sitting at my window seat. I smiled at them through the window, and they returned stiff, strained smiles. The homeroom teacher began reviewing the semester's performance. I knew they weren't listening to a word. Usually they slouched or fidgeted, but now they sat hunched, heads down, hands clasped tightly, as if awaiting judgment. The teacher said, "This is a critical period as we transition from elementary to middle school, so I must address some students' issues." Sebastian and Victoria shrank further into their seats. I saw the spikes of Sebastian's mohawk trembling. There are students struggling with certain subjects, some are careless, and others have regressed due to distractions. We'll hand out report cards with notes for parents to review. They sighed with relief, whispering, "No specific criticism, thank goodness." Victoria asked, "Which category does our son fall into?" Sebastian replied, "Keep it down, it's embarrassing. He's probably at the bottom, let's not scold him." The teacher continued, "Another important matter is the student's mental health. Although we haven't faced this issue in our school, there have been reports of bullying in others. Parents, please work with us to build trust, so children feel safe coming to us with their problems. Some endure bullying for years, bearing immense pressure. Others, feeling cornered, may become accomplices in wrongdoing. Early trust and warmth can be a lifelong support, but without it, the gap may never be filled." Parents nodded and clapped. Only Sebastian and Victoria looked stunned. Sebastian's childhood stories often involved beatings, hearing, "You're worthless, why don't you just die?" Victoria lost her parents young, living with her abusive uncle. When he wanted to sell her parents' house, she refused, leading to her living alone, scavenging to survive. Isolated at school, she found solace with an older girl, a dropout, who sometimes gave her food. I called softly, "Dad, Mom." They didn't react until a parent behind them tapped their shoulders, saying, "The teacher called you up." Startled, they hurried to the stage, looking like students being scolded. They stole glances at the teacher, who repeated, "I invite Michael's parents to share their educational experience." They looked shocked. Sebastian muttered, "What experience?" Scratching his head, unable to move his styled hair, Victoria took the lead, "I'll speak." But she had only planned that line and was at a loss for words. Facing the expectant audience, she looked at me and said, "Honestly, we don't have any educational experience. Michael's success is 1,100% his own doing. No, 1,105%, because sometimes we may not help but rather hinder him. Standing here is embarrassing. Let him come up instead." As she tried to leave with Sebastian, the teacher smiled and stopped them. Such modest parents. "Although this is our first meeting, I know a bit about you from Michael's essays. You've provided a free and safe environment for him to thrive." I watched their faces turn redder. "So this award for Michael, let his parents present it to him." I entered the classroom and stood by. They took the certificate from the teacher, admiring it, whispering, "A real award. I dreamed of this as a kid but never got one, so this is what it feels like." Reluctantly, I had to interrupt. "That's mine." They handed it to me, eyes still glued to it. Unlike their tense approach, they left the school with heads held high, floating. On the way home, they bombarded me with questions. "How are your grades so good? We thought you were faking it." "Yeah, we didn't want to burst your bubble." "Whose brain did you inherit? Must be mine." "Nonsense. It's definitely from me. How could your teacher be so nice and not say a harsh word to any student?" "My teacher was." "Let's not talk about it." "Oh, and don't look down on other students just because you have good grades. If they ask you questions, Michael would never be like that," Victoria interrupted. They had many questions, but thankfully I didn't need to answer them all. Just smiling was enough. On my birthday, I picked up the cake from the old man's shop, learning it had been sold and a new owner would take over tomorrow. I gave him my saved pocket money. He said, "The cake is already paid for." I shook my head. "For what my parents owe you." He laughed. "One willing to give, one willing to take, no debt. Besides, I just sold the shop. I have plenty of money, more than your whole family combined." I relayed this to my parents at home. Sebastian sneered. "That old man should have retired long ago." Victoria nodded. "Exactly. He's old and confused. What's he need all that money for?" Victoria carefully placed the cake in the fridge and asked, "What time does it end? Can we come back at 8? I was shocked. "What do you mean, you're not staying for my birthday?" Victoria was more surprised. "What? You want us here? Who wants to celebrate with parents?" I smiled. "I do." They exchanged confused looks, finally saying, "But your friends will see us." I replied, "Yes, they've wanted to meet you." Victoria frowned. "But we look like this. They'll make fun of you. I see other parents looking so proper." Sebastian nodded. "Yeah, kids say whatever. They might isolate you." Ignoring their chatter, I checked the time. The doorbell rang. They jumped up in a panic. Opening the door, a sweet voice called, "Michael, happy birthday." My deskmate Emma hugged my arm. "Am I the first one here?" I replied, "Yes, you're the most eager." Taking her gift, I turned to introduce her, but she had already met Sebastian and Victoria. "Hello, I'm Michael's deskmate. He talks about you often. Finally, we meet." Sebastian replied, "Hello, hello," awkwardly rubbing his hands. Soon, all 7 or 8 invited friends arrived. Busy in the kitchen, entertaining guests fell to Sebastian and Victoria. I had seen Sebastian with his rowdy friends, always noisy, especially when Jack was around. And Victoria never cared about others' opinions. Now they seemed helpless, surrounded by my friends. "Your parents are so cool," they said. "Blue hair like a fairy. Michael says you never nag him about homework or TV. Is that true?" "That's awesome." Sebastian gradually relaxed, basking in the praise, while Victoria calmly added, "Homework must be done, though. TV less, okay?" When I served the dishes, friends admired, "I love cooking, but my mom won't let me in the kitchen. Same here, they say it's dangerous." I smiled, showing my scarred finger. "They're not wrong. It's risky. See? Be careful. Learn to cook when you're older." Emma examined my old scar, now a faint white line. "Your parents must have been worried." Sebastian and Victoria stared at my hand, wanting to ask, but restrained by the crowd. I answered for them, "Of course." At the table, we chatted about school, laughing often. Some friends shared gaming interests with Sebastian, who generously shared tips until Victoria glared, prompting, "Study hard, play less," then self-mocked, "Study hard." From me? Victoria, meanwhile, entertained with her makeup station. She hesitated, offering hair accessories instead, enhancing everyone's looks. Soon we crowded the mirror, laughing and chatting. Victoria, smiling more than I'd ever seen, often held her face to hide laugh lines. By 9, friends reluctantly left. A boy asked, "Are you an internet celebrity, ma'am? You look familiar." Victoria froze, visibly anxious. Friends eagerly asked for her account. She said, "I'm not, you must be mistaken." Someone suggested, "Can we search by the photo?" Before anyone could react, Victoria suddenly slapped the phone out of Emma's hand. Emma yelped in surprise, looking lost. I quickly picked up the phone and checked the screen in the light. Thankfully, it wasn't damaged. I handed it back to her, saying, "Sorry, if you find any issues later, let me know." Then I hurriedly ushered everyone out, their faces puzzled, but no one dared to ask questions under the tense atmosphere. Even the final goodbyes to uncle and aunt were mumbled quietly. I didn't have a phone, but knew Victoria live-streamed with her friend Grace every night. As for the content, I was clueless. Victoria sat dazed on the sofa, her face dark again, as if it had never shown a smile. Sebastian asked, "Are you going tonight?" Victoria looked at him, then at me, stood up quickly and declared, "Of course, I live on this. Am I ashamed? What do I fear?" The sound of her high heels echoed through the hallway and faded. I asked Sebastian, "Are you going out too?" He replied, "I'll sleep a bit. Wake me at midnight. Jack arranged a car race tonight." I agreed. Before, I'd remind him to be safe, but later I learned he actually did support work for the young racers and could only touch the cars when no one was around, which relieved me. Once Sebastian was asleep, I took his phone and found Victoria's account among his follows. To be exact, it wasn't just hers, but featured her and Grace in dual videos, mainly dancing to trending songs or casual, shaky clips, each with only a few likes. Do people watch this kind of live stream? Curiously, I clicked into the live stream through the flashing icon. Indeed, there were viewers, many. They stood under a dim streetlight on an unknown quiet path. Victoria's makeup was much heavier than before. Grace took the front, chatting with familiar viewers while Victoria stood behind, looking at the road. A comment read, "Victoria seems distracted today, didn't even smile when I sent gifts." Grace laughed exaggeratedly. "No way. Victoria always says how grateful she is for your support. She's wonderful." She called, "Victoria, come thank our supporter." Victoria swayed her hips and, with a purposely sweetened voice, said, "Thank you. Send another gift, and I'll dance for you." The screen flashed with gift effects, followed by a comment, "Dance while stripping." Victoria calmly removed her fuzzy coat, revealing a tight-knit undershirt. Though it was midwinter and freezing at night, she maintained a smile, though her lips began to tremble uncontrollably. Another comment read, "Strip another layer." I knew there was a pink camisole underneath. The pace quickened. Viewers loved seeing her turn pale with cold. Comments grew increasingly indecent. They handled them effortlessly, clearly targeting Victoria, with Grace more like an assistant or manager, maintaining the mood and relaying requests. She often streamed till dawn, rarely talking about it, so I assumed she just sat in a prepared studio overnight. She was beautiful, well-groomed, and naturally drew viewers. But now I realized many such beautiful people exist, and trying to trade beauty for money often comes at the cost of dignity. Grace fiddled with her phone, suddenly announcing, "Sorry everyone, something urgent came up, ending early today. See you tomorrow." Victoria stopped mid-motion, confused, but Grace closed the stream without explanation. I woke Sebastian and asked, "Do you know where Victoria live streams?" He sleepily rubbed his face, yes. Thinking I was influenced by classmates, he added, "Don't worry about it. She's an adult with her own choices. We were just confusedly together and had you. No choice but to stick it out, or just take care of yourself." I asked, "Aren't you worried?" He replied, "Worried about what? If some big shot genuinely likes her, I'd happily send her off with drums and gongs." Speechless, I started to say more, but he answered a call and hurried out. That night, I slept restlessly. In the quiet morning, which was typical, I couldn't focus on anything, constantly calling them. Finally, by nightfall, I got through. Victoria's distant voice said, "Hello, Michael. Need pocket money? Check my drawer." I asked, "Where are you?" She said, "It's none of your concern." "Where are you, Mom?" When I arrived at the hospital, Sebastian's head was nearly fully bandaged. He spent a week in the hospital and was still weak upon discharge. The doctor advised bed rest for another 2 weeks. Back home, he felt a bit better, talking more. I finally pieced together what happened. After ending the stream early, Grace had no other business, just chatting with Victoria by the roadside about future plans for their account. Victoria trusted her, knowing she was more experienced in the field. Without Grace's help, she wouldn't have managed to make a living this way. Despite her doubts, she patiently stayed until a man in his 40s showed up, revealing Grace's true intention. The account back end was always managed by Grace. She told Victoria, "I can handle other tasks, but you must learn to manage the patrons yourself," and then left. The patron invited Victoria to chat in his car. She, sensing danger, delayed by saying it was a nice night and they could talk outside. It was a secluded area, with almost no one passing by. The patron chuckled, "All right, let's be romantic first." Meanwhile, Sebastian was cheering for Jack. A newly arrived friend said he saw Victoria. Sebastian nonchalantly replied, "So what?" The friend added, "She was with a guy getting cozy." Amid their teasing laughter, Sebastian said, "Whatever, we do our own thing." Bored of his indifference, they changed the topic. During a break, Sebastian casually asked where they saw her. The friend, busy changing parts, said, "Not streaming tonight, huh? Maybe shouting for help instead." Sebastian clenched his fists. "What do you mean?" The friend laughed. "Just some fun, you know. The guy had a nice car, seems rich." Sebastian rushed over, finding Victoria on the roadside, clothes torn, dazed, and the big yellow dog panting beside her. He sometimes bought sausages only to see them disappear, knowing Victoria fed them to the stray dog, claiming it must have been someone's pet before since it was so smart. How will it survive the winter? She wondered. Life has always been cruel. Those with bad luck live day by day. Seeing Sebastian, Victoria's first words were, "It's hurt, help it." The dog had saved her, so she wanted to save it. Sebastian quickly assessed the situation but stayed put, staring at her. "Serves you right, you idiot. You were sold and didn't know. What's in your head? How did you grow up?" Victoria hugged herself, silent. Sebastian's voice rose. "If you didn't want this, say so earlier. Alone with a man at night and you regret it? Or did you play hard to get and it backfired? The dog ruined your plan." Victoria shouted, "Damn you!" She stood, her coat falling, exposing her knitted top split open. Her skin turned red from the cold wind. "Here for a joke, huh? Yes, I'm stupid. Would I be with you if I weren't? I've had the worst luck meeting you." Sebastian retorted, "You're heartless. I ran down from the mountain to laugh at you." "Then why are you here?" she asked. "What do you want to do?" Sebastian replied, "That guy, tell me who he is. We'll get back at him at least." Victoria screamed, "Get lost." Limping away with the dog, she didn't know Sebastian later learned the patron's identity from Grace. He messed up by attacking first, leaving Grace bruised and barely speaking. Only after listening closely did he confirm the patron's influential background. Seeking help from Jack, Jack lazily said there was no need to cause trouble over a small matter. Nothing happened. A guy might have been scared off by the dog, or consider it even. Sebastian insisted, standing with a dark face. Jack added, "Next time, if something real happens, we'll have grounds to demand justice." "Then it's too late," Sebastian replied. Jack said, "You've been with me this long, still so naive. Women, I can get you another." Jack's clear stance meant others sided with him, leaving Sebastian alone. Sebastian said, "I took some punches too, I hit hard." He repeated this on the hospital bed. I half-heartedly agreed, "Yes, of course," thinking the patron must be less hurt or he'd seek revenge. Victoria, hearing his bravado, fumed. "You're brainless, thinking you're a hero. You deserved it. The guy could kill you easily and you're still talking tough." Sebastian retorted, "I wanted to. Just be smarter next time." I realized their marriage lasted due to limited interaction. Now, with Sebastian recovering at home and Victoria caring for him, they argued frequently. Observing, I deduced they couldn't communicate well, turning concern, worry, and gratitude into hostility. Volunteering as mediator, I conveyed their feelings. "She means you acted recklessly, worrying and upsetting her. He means he's willing to risk everything for you, but you should be safe too." My involvement reduced their bickering, though they still avoided talking much. With winter break, I should have cooked for the patient, but Victoria barred me from the kitchen, saying, "I'll do it. He's suffered enough. If he eats your cooking, he might not survive." Offended, I protested, but seeing Sebastian's delighted face as he ate, I had to admit her cooking was superior. I asked, "You don't usually cook. When did you learn?" I devoured my food as well. She smiled. "When I lived alone as a child, who else would cook? I learned to make delicious meals from market scraps, but eating alone made me lose interest in cooking." She collected the dishes. Sebastian quietly asked, "Can you cook a few more days?" "Please." Her reply, softer, "From now on, I'll cook for Michael. As for you, it depends on your behavior." Sebastian asked, "Really?" Victoria said, "He's still a child. His hands need to write and play, not get hurt." Sebastian, gently, "You seem to." Victoria cut him off. "Shut up." Sebastian improved, starting light activities. Resolutely, he deleted all his friends' contacts, including Jack's, as they hadn't contacted him since the incident. He told Victoria, "I'm recovering well. You don't need to stay home. Go, do your thing." Victoria paused, her sweeping, "What should I do?" Sebastian, feeling both relieved and aimless without his friends, pondered his next steps. Then came a knock. "Who?" Sebastian asked. "Your father," was the reply. He cursed, "Whose brat is that?" Opening the door, he was speechless. "Dad. Grandpa." I greeted cautiously from behind Victoria, who pulled me to our room. On my birthday, a fierce argument had severed ties with Grandpa. Victoria explained, "When you were born, he called you a bastard and tried to take you away. We stopped him. My stitches tore. Avoid him." I nodded, knowing some in their circle gave birth but left the child with grandparents. Few kept their child with them. I eavesdropped on the conversation. "Your sister found a punk, your brother ran away. What curse has befallen us?" He handed Sebastian his phone. "What's this?" "The Yu family's daughter. They agreed if you divorce Victoria, we'll unite our families. Then you can return to the Dawson family." Sebastian declined. "What, you're not already divorced?" "I won't divorce Victoria or leave my child. Why be stubborn? For that disgraceful woman." Sebastian coldly, "I don't hit the elderly out of respect. Back then we were clueless and young. Victoria endured hours of pain giving birth. I was terrified, thinking her pregnancy struggles were bad enough. When the child was born, your first reaction was to get rid of him and say such a woman was only for fun. Even at my worst, I'd never abandon my child or partner. Victoria suffered with me for years, while you, who abandoned your family, act righteous. You left Mom depressed and alone. I won't let that happen again. Victoria is my wife. Who are you?" "You'll kill me with anger." Amid their argument, I only heard Victoria's sobs. After a loud door slam, we emerged. Sebastian joked, "Crying just seeing him? Don't worry, you won't again." Victoria hugged him tightly. He, stunned, sought my reaction, then returned the hug fiercely. With the new semester, our breakfast stall, after weeks of preparation, opened. Waking early for business suited their nocturnal schedule. Victoria's culinary skills now brought prosperity. Each morning, I sat at the steamy stall, eating breakfast, watching them work in harmony, grinning widely. One day I saw a young child steal a bun while Victoria turned away. Before I reacted, Sebastian had grabbed the child. Rushing over, I saw the thin, desperate-looking kid. Sebastian growled, "Stealing buns?" The child, hands open, apologized. "I'm sorry, I won't do it again." Sebastian said, "You can have the bun on credit. Bring your model student award as collateral or I'll talk to your teacher." Clutching the bun, the child nodded and ran off, looking back once more. Victoria untied Sebastian's apron. "Don't be so harsh. You scared him. Go fetch the vegetables." He pedaled off, returning soon, but without any vegetables. He stopped and shouted to Victoria, "Call the police, Sunshine Community thieves." Then he bent down and pedaled hard toward the next neighborhood. By the time the police arrived, Sebastian had already chased and tackled the two thieves after a 2-kilometer sprint. Sebastian explained to the police that he had seen two old acquaintances while waiting at a red light on his way to get vegetables. Not wanting to be recognized, he didn't greet them but overheard their plan to rob an old man who had just sold his shop. After initially moving forward, he decided he couldn't stand by and turned to pursue them. The thieves, recognizing him, told the police, "He's with us, calling thief to throw you off." The police called the old man for identification, and at a glance he pointed at Sebastian, saying, "It's not him, he's a good kid." The thieves were taken away, revealing multiple burglaries in the area during the New Year holiday. Hearing of Sebastian's heroics, more residents visited the breakfast stall. Some neighbors even helped out when Sebastian and Victoria were overwhelmed, making everyone feel like family. That summer after my elementary graduation, my parents' hard work had secured their shop. At my suggestion, they held a proper wedding. In the morning, I helped Victoria with her dress. She looked stunning in the sunlight. I suddenly asked, "Mom, am I named Michael because I was born on a sunny morning?" She shook her head. "No, like me, you were born in a misty dawn, but I wanted you to have the brightness of the morning sun." She stroked my head. During the wedding, I walked our new family member, Max, as the ring bearer. Mom's speech was heartfelt. We didn't have a wedding back then because I felt no one truly blessed me and I didn't deserve happiness. But now, I constantly feel loved. I want to thank my son. I once thought I couldn't handle the responsibility, but my son is the best in the world. She choked up. He understands me. Thank you all for showing me what genuine kindness feels like. After the applause, Sebastian nervously took the microphone, stumbling over his words. Suddenly he turned, lifting his shirt to reveal his back, shocking the audience. Years ago I wanted utter despair tattooed here, but only got through utter before the pain made me stop. The audience laughed. A few days ago I finished it. It reflects my current life and is my blessing to you. The audience saw the neatly tattooed words, "All will be well."